Sci-Fi Buzz travels to Orlando this week to preview the Halloween hysteria at Universal Studios, Florida. Kurt Russell and friends shuttle us from ancient times to a strange future in the new film, Stargate. Harlan Ellison cues us on hot comics, good books, and fabulous posters and puzzles. And Sci-Fi Buzz remembers the late master storyteller, Robert Bloch.
I don't think that it bothers me to hear that horror writers must be nuts, because I don't believe a word of it.
Hi everybody, welcome to Sci-Fi Buzz. This week coming to you from Orlando, Florida. Not a lot of science fiction here, but a lot of fantasy and horror. Hey Buzzers, we're at Universal Studios Florida in Orlando, Florida, here to check out their Halloween Horror Nights. It's a great event. They turn the entire park at this time of year into 4 very scary haunted houses. The place is crawling with about 300 very creepy characters. Pardon me, they call them scaracters. We'll be swooping through the park today, bothering tourists and harassing small children. You know how I love to do that. Before we get any farther, though, I want to tell you that the most expensive and fanciful science fiction film of the year is only 1 week away. It's Stargate!
Jackson, it's all right. It's over.
Kurt Russell stars in the sweeping science fiction epic Stargate. As the head of a top-secret mission, Russell's Jack O'Neill becomes stranded on an alien planet millions of light years from Earth. This role seems tailor-made for one of Hollywood's pumped-up, monosyllabic action stars. But director Roland Emmerich created the project with only Russell in mind for the part.
I've had my share of action pictures and adventure pictures, and I've done in the past some sci-fi, but I was surprised that they were as convinced that I should be the guy to play this man.
Your job here is to realign the Stargate. Can you do that or not?
By the time Emmerich approached Russell, the scope of this film was unlike any the actor had experienced. The filmmakers planned to create an entire alien culture based on ancient Egypt. They envisioned mammoth sets, a cast of almost 2,000, and groundbreaking special effects. But despite their enthusiasm, Russell wasn't sure if he should take the plunge.
In my estimation, these are the kind of movies that you take a risk on. Because these movies are very strange. I mean, you don't know what special effects are going to end up looking like. You don't know, what somebody's imagination is going to end up in material form looking like.
Action! Once on the set, amidst the swirl of such a vast and effects-heavy undertaking, Kurt still wondered whether or not he'd made the right decision.
I was, and have remained questioning until you could see it, until you could see what the final result is. Mm-hmm. What were you really looking at, with amazement? What they're able to do right now is great, and it's served our movie well, and I think that we're probably on the cusp right now of blowing into a whole greater range of being able to present a movie that is so out of this world that we can be stunned by what Hollywood can create.
Don't look at the beam.
Many Hollywood stars feel threatened by the possibility that effects technology will ultimately replace them. But after working on Stargate, Russell sees himself as effects friendly.
I'm looking forward to the day when they can do me. I really am. I think that's going to be fascinating. I'd love to be able to direct myself, not having to do it. I mean, I'd love to just be able to take my figure, my face, my voice, and work it to where exactly where I'd like to, and that's what you get paid to do. I think that will be fantastic.
Until that day comes, Kurt Russell is doing just fine on his own.
I'm Lynn Duncan from Richmond, California. I'd like to recommend a stunning debut novel by Maggie Fury. Orion from Batum Spectrum Books is a well-crafted fantasy novel about Orion, a daughter of the mage folk. Orion is the first book in a new trilogy and is filled with vivid characters, complex plot lines, love, hate, death, betrayal, and hope. I highly recommend it.
Just down the time stream, remembering Robert Bloch. And Wes Craven has another nightmare. Welcome to the Sci-Fi Buzz vacation home. Actually, it's the Psycho House, of course, and it's one of the fixtures here at Universal Studios, Florida. Of course, this house wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Robert Bloch. No, there wouldn't be any Bates Motel, there wouldn't be any house here, there wouldn't be any Psycho without Robert Bloch. He wrote the book that eventually turned into the movie, Psycho. Well, Robert Bloch recently passed away, so we decided to revisit this master storyteller. After Psycho was published in 1959, author Robert Bloch became a major force on the horror scene. Fans got a peek into the mind that gave us hundreds of deranged stories in his unauthorized autobiography, Once Around the Block.
I think the thing that's going to astonish a number of people who read it is the fact that I never did anything that was very astonishing.
That's hard to believe. After all, Bloch had been conjuring up creepy tales ever since he sold his first story to Weird Tales magazine at the tender age of 17. His path in life was set after striking up a correspondence with his literary hero, H.P. Lovecraft. The legendary, albeit elusive, horror writer was the one who first encouraged Bloch to try his hand at writing.
Lovecraft can be read today and still surprise a lot of people. He's one of the first writers in weird fiction to invent his own mythology, his own superstitions. And as a result, this created a whole new fantasy world that was superimposed on our own real world.
At first, he was inspired by Lovecraft's imagination. But then Bloch found his own voice and discovered he wanted to tell a different kind of tale.
I decided that writing about superstitions and horrors of long ago wasn't quite as shocking as writing about present-day horrors in a different world, the little world up here in the human mind. And that's why I switched.
Bloch was one of the first authors to make anti-heroes the focus of his stories. His greatest anti-hero was inspired by reading about a real-life murderer named Ed Gein, who lived in a Wisconsin town near Bloch.
I invented Norman Bates. I invented him as a character, and I built him a motel, and I installed a shower in it for him. None of these things had anything to do with the real Ed Gein.
Soon after Psycho was published, Hollywood came calling. Film rights to the book were sold to Shamley Productions. After his humble check was cashed, Bloch discovered the man behind Shamley was none other than Alfred Hitchcock.
Hitch decided to do my book, and he did. He changed no part of the plot. He changed none of the characters except downgrading the age of Norman Bates. But the big thing that he did, of course, was the shower scene, which is mentioned in the book, but is mentioned very abruptly, very suddenly. It just happens like that and catches the reader unaware.
Though he published works outside the genre, Bloch will always be best known for his chilling horror stories. But a lot of readers tended to believe that because he could cook up this stuff, Bloch must be a bit demented himself.
I don't think that it bothers me to hear that horror writers must be nuts, because I don't believe a word of it. Consider for a moment, well, I spent a great deal of my life writing about werewolves, but as you can see, I'm clean-shaven. I've written a lot about vampires, but I've never sucked anybody's blood. I leave that to my agent. And as a result, I don't feel that I necessarily resemble my characters.
Attention East Coast buzzers. This is Ray calling from Jersey City, New Jersey to tell you about the Chiller Theater Halloween Weekend Convention taking place October 28th, 29th, and 30th at the Meadowlands Hilton Hotel in Secaucus, New Jersey. Now, for more information about this landmark convention, that's the Chiller Theater Halloween Weekend Convention, October 28th through the 30th at the Meadowlands Hilton in Secaucus, New Jersey. And I'll see you buzzers there.
Wes Craven's new Nightmare coming up in just a little bit, but first I want to give you the buzzboard line. Up next. First of all, though, how about a scary face from me? It's been 10 years since a ferocious figment of director Wes Craven's imagination was first visualized for moviegoers. After steering clear of the last 3 Nightmare on Elm Street installments, he's back on board for Wes Craven's new Nightmare.
People don't want to admit how much rage they have in them or how much fear they have in them. And horror very openly deals with rage and fear.
Craven is known as a master spinner of spooky tales, and he's proud that his most frightful creation, Freddy Krueger, came from the darkest recesses of his mind.
Wes, how can we stop him?
I think the only way to stop him is to make another movie. The way this film came about is very, very unusual. I had lunch with Heather Langenkamp, who was the star of the first one, and I asked her if she was interested in doing another film, and she said if I directed it, she would be. And she told me some things about her personal life, and which I found fascinating. I was thinking that maybe I should do something based on some of those events. And shortly after, I started having dreams, very, very, you know, sort of shocking dreams and very fascinating dreams along the lines of things that were actually happening or had happened with Heather.
Look, we need to talk, but not over the phone. Can I come over?
Actually, Heather, today's no good. There's something I have to finish. Tomorrow, maybe, huh?
So we proposed a new line that we do a film that was basically about Heather as an actress and base it around the events that were happening to her, which were very strange sort of psychological events and some things with phone call harassment and things that were happening with her son.
Craven's story eventually evolved into a film within a film. The eclectic cast includes New Line Cinema chairman Bob Shea, the man behind the Freddy facade, Robert Englund, and of course Wes Craven, all playing themselves. During production, the line between fantasy and reality grew so thin that Craven says the script literally began to write itself.
One of the extraordinary things is what I had a dream that that one of the precursors to this person calling was that there would be earthquakes, and we actually filmed that scene, and a month later the earthquake hit in Los Angeles. So all that is worked into the movie.
In his determined effort to capture his dreams on film, Craven utilized cutting-edge optical effects. But joining the digital revolution really tried the patience of this old-fashioned filmmaker.
You know, it's like very painstakingly slow. Say, like 2 billion trips to the optical house to look at 1-minute dailies, you know, or 30 seconds of dailies a day, and then you go back the next day and look at 30 seconds again, and there's a slight change. So it's a very, very slow, laborious process. But you can, if you have enough money and time, put almost anything that you have seen onto film, which is great.
New Line Cinema owns the rights to the Freddy franchise, and rumor has it they'll be teaming him up with Friday the 13th's Jason for a double dose of sick cinema. But for Wes Craven, this film will be his final nightmare.
It really is a great capper to the Nightmare series, I think, and it's not by any means just a sequel. It jumps outside films into reality and in a very unusual and frightening way.
This is the new collection of short stories, 10 short stories by Alexander Jablakov, Arkham House. A-R-K-H-A-M, Arkham House, publishing house, a small house. Now, one of the keynotes of an Arkham House book is that they're beautiful. They're just put together beautifully. If you ever could just hold one and see, it's got this wonderful binding and head and tail bands, and absolutely fabulous illustrations in this particular book by J.K. Potter. These are mostly stories of the near future, and The Breath of Suspension is a wonderful book, but you're not going to be able to buy it through most bookstores. You're going to have to order it from Arkham House, and all you have to do is write and say, send me a catalog, and they'll send you a catalog. Also recommend a terrific new comic book. Well, it's not a comic book, actually. It's a graphic novel. It's called Jar of Fools. Jar of Fools, and it's written and drawn by a guy named Jason Lutz. This comic was the talk of the Comic-Con this year, the San Diego Comic-Con. Everybody was saying, this is the hot book, the hot-in book. Now, it's not superheroes, and it's not mystical stuff like that. It's just a really interesting kind of book, the same way Kyle Baker's Why I Hate Saturn of a couple of years ago was interesting. Now, if you want to order this one, it's called Jar of Fools by Jason Lutz, and I recommend it highly. It's very, very interesting. As long as we're on comic books, best comic in years. Up there with The Sandman, up there with Peter David's Hulk. This is a book called Zombie, X-O-M-B-I. And it's weird, man. This is like Doom Patrol when Grant Morrison took it over and made it real good. It is a very, very hot book, very exciting, very strange, very surreal. Again, for instance, he said, flipping to the front cover, this character here, she's recurring. She's called the Catholic Schoolgirl. And as you can see, it says, it was the sound of mist chewing. Very good comic. I urge you to get it. Here's John Crowley's new one, Love and Sleep. It's the sequel to John Crowley's novel, Egypt, and I recommend it. It's very, very good. It's not as good as Egypt, but it's very, very good. One plug for the Comics Buyer's Guide. This is the weekly newspaper of the industry, comics industry. It's got everything in it you could possibly want to know about comics during the week. And it's full of ads, and it's full of all kinds of interesting articles about what's happening in Comics Weekly. It is a must-not-miss reading experience every week if you like comics. I wish I could recommend the best in science fiction. It's not as good as it should be. It's filled with errors, filled with the kinds of errors that perpetuate themselves in other encyclopedic books and reference books in the science fiction field. I guess it's like $50. And it's interesting. It's got some good stuff in it, but it is not as flawless as it ought to be for that kind of money. Okay, so now this is the other thing I wanted to show you, a terrific new thing to buy. There's this friend of mine up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. His name is Grant Kornberg, and Grant used to have a bookshop called the Hardback Cafe, which is a bookstore and a restaurant. He got out of that business. He now does something called Largely Literary Designs. Largely Literary Design. You don't have to get too close on that. And one of the things that he does in Largely Literary Designs are these incredible posters and jigsaw puzzles called Buried Blueprints. And they're the work of Albert Lorenz, and they're incredible. This is my beautiful wife, and she and I were going to put one of these jigsaw puzzles together for you. So we worked for about 135 hours yesterday. And unfortunately, this is as much as we got done. What we're putting together here is Noah's Ark. That's what it's supposed to look like. And this is as much as we've gotten done. Now let me tell you how to order these. There's an 800 number. This is really... Great jigsaw puzzles, and no one else has ever shown them to you. We are the first, and I tell you, they are sensational.
This is Dave Rossi from the Star Trek production office in Hollywood. Join me and my friends next weekend, Sunday, October 30th, at the Burbank Airport Hilton and Convention Center for a Horizon Convention featuring Sadiq El-Sadil, Dr. Bashir of Deep Space Nine, Jonathan Frakes, Will Riker, and Star Trek Generations, and the writers of the new movie, Ron Moore and Brannon Braga. For more information on this and other events.
Okay, Buzzers, back to Florida and our Buzz Best Bets after this commercial cacophony.
Studios, Florida, on the Ghostbusters set. Pretty cool, huh? And a perfect place because we have some madness for you just in time for Halloween.
Calling all fright flick fanatics, a demonic invasion has hit movie theaters, and we'll point you towards the cinematic slugfest on this week's Buzz Best Bets.
Something unusual was reported entering our atmosphere last night.
Legendary genre author Robert Heinlein's classic novel, The Puppet Masters, has finally made it to the big screen. This sci-fi thriller tells the tale of some slimy slugs from outer space who come to Earth and fasten themselves to people's backs, gaining total control of their thoughts and actions.
And why do they come here? What do they want?
Academy Award winner Greg Canham of Canham Creations was called in to design and build the alien parasites that are so crucial to the story. Drawing inspiration from stingrays, among other things, about 100 creatures were eventually constructed. The film's erudite star, Donald Sutherland, was suitably squeamish about his creepy co-stars.
These creatures are wonderful. The guys who built them have done really great things with them. They're really ugly.
Robert Heinlein's The Puppet Masters recently slithered into theaters everywhere. That's this week's Buzz Best Bet.
Hey, Kelly, you think I'm going to need surgery on this neck skin, huh? Flapping? You know what? I don't even need it. Not very funny. I don't need makeup anymore because Sci-Fi Buzz is over for this week. You know, we're not going to be on next week. The Sci-Fi Channel has a Halloween special for you, the whole weekend devoted to your favorite science fiction episodes and a horror movie marathon all week. It starts Saturday at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. Watch for that. Well, the Buzz is over for this week. I guess I better bolt. See ya in 2 weeks for Sci-Fi Buzz and next week for the movie marathon. Okay, here we go. Hi there, how you doing?
The mysteries of aliens, the magic of Houdini, the miracles of angels. Now the real stories, people, and events are explained in a thrilling new series, Mysteries, Magic, and Miracles, hosted by Patrick McNee. Premieres next on the Sci-Fi Channel.